And let's do a sit. I'll give some instructions. We'll sit for a while and then I'll give a talk. And then I love to talk about the talk with you. Like, what did you hear? What did you like? What didn't you like? What made sense? What didn't make sense? Anything like that. So if you have, when I'm giving the talk, I won't go to chat while I'm giving the talk, but if you want to ask me questions or make comments about the talk, remember them or write them down for yourself, because it's much more dynamic for me, and I think for everybody, if we fill the room with Dharma, not just my talk. So please consider that. And really good to sit up straight, however you're sitting, if you're on a bench or a cushion or a chair. And if you're not muted, I'm going to mute people so that it can be quiet during the sit. I mean, I'll talk, but also, and it's really helpful to be sitting on your sit bones as much as possible. If you're on a chair, the cushion or the bench, so that you're, so the uprightness of the spine begins at the base of the spine and goes all the way through the back of the neck. And then if you're comfortable with your eyes closed, you can shut your eyes and just be aware of what's here when you shut your eyes. What are you aware of when you shut your eyes? When you begin meditating without doing anything? Some of us will be aware of our bodies, of course. Maybe you're feeling tired. Maybe it's been a long day. Maybe it's warm or cool wherever you are. Some of us may be aware of some feelings or emotions that are here. Something happened today that made you happy. Maybe something made you sad or angry or joyful. And of course, some of us will be aware of thoughts happening. And you can be aware of any of it. You don't have to fix anything. You can be aware of thoughts without being mesmerized by thought, without being enchanted by thought. Thoughts are happening mostly on their own. And of course, that's true of emotions or moods. They're just happening on their own. They arise and sustain for a while, or they pass away. And we can be aware of thoughts, feelings, body, experience. And if it's helpful, you can start or center or ground yourself by being mindful of the body sitting here breathing, which is the most traditional meditation practice we do. It establishes the first foundation of mindfulness, body fullness, heart fullness. And if it's helpful to be mindful of the body breathing, give yourself to it. Devote yourself to it. Letting everything else be in the background for a while. Letting the thoughts or feelings or other sensations in the body be in the background, letting the body and the breathing, the body that's breathing, be in the foreground. As if you could let your consciousness steep in the body and the breath. Or let your consciousness saturate the body that's breathing. See how intimate you can get with the body and the breath. Getting closer to the lived experience of the body breathing. Some of us may be particularly attuned to the breath at the nostrils. Some of us may be more attuned to the movement in the torso, the chest, the belly rising and falling. Some of us will simply be aware of the whole body as it breathes. And as many of you know, the consistency of being with the body breathing starts to ground us, create a sense of composure, of collectedness between body and mind. And it takes a certain proactive devotion, devoting oneself to being mindful of the breath, to being aware of the breath, breath by breath. If your mind and heart begin to center here with the body and the breathing, you have a choice. You could stay with the body breathing for the whole meditation. Always a skillful way to practice. Mindfulness of breathing is what the Buddha did on the night of his enlightenment. And if you feel comfortable with the body breathing and you want to open up the space of awareness, you can start to be aware of whatever's predominant in your experience, whatever comes to the foreground of awareness, which is what we started with, a more open awareness. Being aware of the body, the breath, or being aware of other sensations if they're predominant. Sensations may be pleasant or unpleasant or neutral, and you can be aware of that. The Vedana, the second foundation of mindfulness, with any sensation. You may feel like your body's relaxing and it's pleasant. You can be aware of it. Or you may feel some tension in your shoulder or tightness in your jaw, and you can be aware of that. That's usually an unpleasant Vedana. Or you could simply be aware that your body feels still, which may feel pleasant or may feel neutral. Or as we open to the space of awareness, we may be aware there are thoughts, ideas, beliefs, memories, plans, commentary. And you don't have to stop it, but don't be mesmerized by it. Be aware of it. Being aware means we observe the thought, the memory coming, the words that come from nowhere and mostly go nowhere. And you can be very relaxed about being mindful of thought. Most of our thoughts just happen on their own. We're not even trying to think them. They just do themselves. Of course, it's the same with emotions or feelings. They just appear. And we can be aware of them. We don't even have to take them personally, even though they feel very personal. Usually we say, I feel sad, or I feel angry, or I feel happy. And it's true, the feeling is in your location, but you're not doing it, and you can't stop it. So you don't have to own it in that conventional way. You can just be aware of it and begin to rest in the awareness that is not bound to what it's aware of. You can be aware of the awareness that's aware of the thoughts, feelings, sensations, sounds, smell, taste, touch, and simply relax into the presence of mindfulness, heart fullness, body fullness. Of course, our meditation practice will include any experience and the reactions that happen to any experience. The Vedana, liking or not liking, or neither liking nor not liking that occurs, and any ideas we have about, oh, this is good, or this is bad, or I want this, or I don't want this. And you can be aware of all of that without having to believe it. It's just ideas, beliefs, reactions. All we're doing is simply learning how to be aware and present moment by moment by moment. It's the simplicity of mindful presence that is difficult. For every and you can hear somebody was not muted and they were speaking, it just becomes part of the meditation sound. And then our reaction to the sound, probably not the most positive reaction. Simply staying very present, very aware, very awake, moment by moment, and watching reality unfold here in this moment. And this is the only moment there is right now. See what appears as you stay here now. Again, hello everybody. Those of you who joined since we started sitting. Uh, I still would love to see people. It's much more fun to teach if there's actual people in view. And so if you could put your visual on, it would be greatly appreciated. It'd even be nice to know if you're really here, because you can't tell. There's a few people. Thank you. God. Oh, you're real. You're alive. Thank you. Thank you. Um, so again, I'm Eugene Cash. If we haven't met before, but and I'm going to talk about courage. It's what I would like to talk about, and I would like to read you a story, and it's about the man who inspired me to uh, give this talk. And the man is a man named Paul Red. And Paul, it was an article in the San Francisco Chronicle when he died. And, uh, and I'll read to you from the article just to get a sense of him because I was uh, really touched by his story and quite moved by his courage and his bodhisattva response to difficulty, the courage that he had in facing difficulty. And the story goes like this. On his first full day of freedom after 44 years in prison, Paul Red was up and dressed by 5 a.m. at the home of his nephew. His first request was to go to McDonald's for a Big Mac and fries. Then he went back to the house, set up a desk in the kitchen, and got to work. This is the first day after 44 years in prison. His work was that he was focused on prison reform. And he lived for 2 years after he got out of prison until he died of COVID. And his nephew said the whole 2 years, that is all he did. He said there were a lot of good guys who don't deserve to be in prison, and I've got to get them home. And and so he went at it every single day. And after spending 44 years behind bars for a crime he said he didn't commit, and he got a few years and a month before he died to respond. And here's the really moving part is his nephew said he was never bitter or angry or upset about the unjust system and the time he spent in prison. He was just all about change and tearing down walls because he was convicted of murder and a drug deal gone bad in San Francisco. And at some point, his conviction was downgraded to manslaughter, and he was he could be offered the possibility of being released for time served, which is what happened. But he was determined to be fully exonerated and use the hell he had been through in prison as a force for good. And he would talk to anybody about it, from street criminals to the criminal law class at Boston University, which he visited on Zoom. And then the teacher of the class, Thomas, said, Paul spoke very powerfully about what it's like to have your life turned upside down by the machinery of a criminal justice system eager to take someone off the streets. And and Bob Thomas, who was the teacher of this class, he was so moved by Paul's appearance, his Zoom appearance, that he joined his pro bono legal team to help clear his name, and said that the battle goes on even after his death. And 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 the teacher, Bob Thomas, said, if you think about what it would be like spend 45 years in prison and 30 years in solitary, I don't see how someone can come through that with any degree of humanity intact. Paul, Thomas said, Paul came through it with more humanity than many people who have never been near a prison, and that is just an astonishing thing to witness. And then they talk in the article about his early life and being a student in Oakland here in California, and see something happened when a friend of his died accidentally falling through a skylight, and he was never the same after that. And he got depressed and started hanging out with an older crowd. And he said at the age of 12, and this is a book that Paul wrote, at the age of 12, I turned to the street life after being forced to give up my prize Spanish class at junior high, right? He said, I do not deny I hustled and dealt drugs and the lifestyle I lived. But he was arrested right after his 19th birthday and was convicted of this homicide. And the accomplishment testified that Red was the killer. And he was given, 7 years to life, which turned out to be 45 years. When he got inside of prison, he got involved in prisoner rights and took part in a hunger strike, and that's what put him in solitary in Folsom State Prison. And that's where he met Lisa Short and Mike Snedeker, who were two young prison rights attorneys who were activists. And they ended up representing him for 2 decades, including many appearances before the parole board where he got turned down. And Snedeker said, Paul is a testament to the power of our basic nature, the power of our basic nature. And it's a beautiful phrase because, of course, it's a basic nature we all share. And Snedeker went on, he said he spent a decade in the hole, which is solitary confinement, and it did not even dent his basic good nature and sunny temperament, right? And then there was a change in the law, and he got released, very emotional for him. And then uh, on the day after he got out, um, his nephew asked him how he remembered the traffic laws after all this time, because he had driven that day. And he said, in my mind, he said, man, I've been driving for 44 years, just like you. In my mind, I got up, I put on my work clothes, and I drove to work and put my day in and drove home. And then there's more to the story about him and where he ended up living, and the fact that he worked on his job of helping people who are in prison every day. And he ended up getting a job in the law office of a civil rights attorney, Yolanda Huang. And the first case she assigned him was to investigate the suicide of a mentally ill prisoner who was in the Alameda County custody. And Red sleuthed out what she was looking for in 48 hours. She said he was a really smart guy with a great nose for information. I was just so inspired to know that someone could go through that experience and still be hopeful and optimistic about life. And then he met a woman, and who he had some communication with when he was in prison, and they became a couple after he got out. And the woman said the positivity and the smartness of his conversation is what attracted me. He was very driven in what he wanted from life, and that was to help others. And so I hope you can hear the bodhisattva-ness of this man, the beautiful heart of this man. And it's a very moving story. It's a sad story because of what he had to endure and the difficulties he had to live through. But he had a tremendous heart. And I think of him as being very courageous. And it inspired me to write this talk, to give a talk at San Francisco Insight about courage. And so when we think about courage, I always like to look up words and see what they mean. So I looked up the word courage and what does it mean to be courageous. And in the dictionary, courage is the ability to do something that frightens one. The ability to do something that frightens one. And it's a certain kind of strength in the face of pain or grief, or the courage to face difficulty, or what we would say is it's the courage to face dukkha directly. And just for my information, is there anybody here who doesn't know what dukkha is? Let me just see. Anybody not know what dukkha is? You can just raise your hand. Okay, everybody knows what dukkha is. Dukkha is suffering or difficulty or dis-ease or dissatisfactoriness or whatever it might be. Um, and uh, so this response to difficulty that is challenging is part of our practice. What's beautiful about courage is it comes from the French courage, which comes from the Latin cor, which means heart. Courage is about heartfulness. Heart is the root of the word courage, and it's really the seed of our emotional life, our heart. And so, courage or courage points us to what is innermost and that we want to align with and honor and to discover what's right here. And of course, when we come into contact with our own courage, it's we understand it in a lot of different ways. In the thesaurus, courage has to do with bravery or a kind of intrepidness or daring, which is all of which is very helpful in practice at different times. And then it also has to do with boldness or having backbone or spirit and spiritedness, which is a beautiful understanding of what courage is about, is really having the spirit to face dukkha or to deal with dukkha or to respond to dukkha, right? And of course, it also means to have resolve or steadfastness or a gutsiness, or in the words that I really liked that were in the thesaurus, was to have pluck. It's not a word we use very much, to have pluck, or to be plucky, or have pluckiness. And then the other word that was in the dictionary is valor, which is, of course, we understand the precepts. Part of the precepts are having valor, or really having a certain kind of integrity. And the great American author Maya Angelou said, courage is the most important of virtues because without courage, you can't practice any other virtue consistently. You can practice any virtue erratically, but nothing consistently without courage. The courage to stand up and really to stand in our really what I want to say is stand in our seat, stand in our place, stand in our presence, and respond to reality, which is um, difficult. And there's a lot of suffering, not just here, like with Eugene or each of you, with you or Kathy or Robin or Ralph or Mira or Diana or whoever, but also in the whole world, there's a lot of dukkha. And so courage has many connotations for how we can respond because people think of courage differently. Most people think to be courageous is to save somebody's life or to risk one's own life. And that's true, that's courageous. And, but even on a simpler level or a more conventional level, courage of leaving an inappropriate relationship, an abusive relationship, because there's fear and there's risk, and one takes the risk. And risk is one of the characteristics of courage. Courage is really a whole a level of skillful means in how to relate to life and relate to life when there's fear or anxiety or apprehension, right? And of course, if we are practicing the Dharma, if there's fear, you want to be aware of it, first of all, and notice what it's like. Reflect for yourself directly. What's fear like in the body or the heart or the mind? And when I am afraid, I notice the tension in the muscles or in the belly, and the kind of um, um, fight or flight or freeze reaction that happens with fear. And of course, that can happen at any time, both when one is alone or with family or collectively. And the practice, being courageous, means to be courageous with our fear. I was reflecting on when I've been afraid, and I was thinking about the kind of psychic fear that happened for me when I was a young man living in New York City, really young man, like a long time ago. And I got mugged 3 times. And the first time, it was not even a big deal. I got mugged, like some guys grabbed me in my building where I lived, and they wanted my money. And I had a couple dollars. I was a poor young hippie, really, back then. And I gave them the couple dollars, and they left, and that was it. And then the second time, same kind of situation in a building. They grabbed me. I had like $1.50, and they looked at it. They said, "Oh, you don't have enough money. We're not going to take it." And they left. So they were very kind muggers. But the third time was much more frightening because uh, it was a group of people, men, and they didn't like me because I was a hippie, and so they just wanted to beat me. And I was with my girlfriend at the time, and she started screaming because they had just thrown me down, was starting to kick me, and she started screaming at the top of her lungs, and they ran away, which was good, and I was okay, but it really scared me about being in New York. And I was also involved in left-wing politics, and so I started feeling like I had to carry something around to protect myself because the fear had really impacted me. And, nothing ever happened again like that. But you just see how quickly we can go into this reactive response to being scared and to being endangered, really. And then, of course, I've had other kinds of fear that I've thought of that was not so dangerous as that, because there can be more subtle fear. For many years here in San Francisco, I swam in the bay, and in the bay is it's cold water, and you swim with I swam without a wetsuit. You just have a little hat on, but you swim in the bay, and it's totally fun, and it's totally wild. But I wasn't, and I'm a good enough swimmer. I did it for many years. I would swim times a week in the bay. I got a little addicted to it. It's quite awakening. You jump into cold water and you wake up quickly. And what happened was somebody said I should swim Alcatraz. I thought, okay, I'll go swim Alcatraz. And you go out, what they do is they put a bunch of you, get on a boat, you go out to Alcatraz, they drop you in the water, and then you swim back to San Francisco. And so I thought, oh, I could do it. And then on the boat, there's a photo of me, and you can see how scared I am. And really, what I'm thinking in my mind is, why the hell did I ever agree to go swim Alcatraz? Because, it's a big deal. And if you get the tide wrong, you can be moved one way or the other very quickly. So anyhow, I, but there was a lot of fear, but I was young enough and macho enough to just do it anyways. And I did it, and it was fine. It was great. And then one time swimming in the bay, and this is closer to shore, but even shore, it's not your turf, right? There are other animals in the water. And so, and there would often be seals, and once in a while, sea lions. And one time I was there, and all of a sudden, this sea lion popped his head up, and he was about 10 feet away from me, maybe less. He felt like it was like this, but he was very close, and he starts barking at me. Rah, 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 rah. And he's got a big mouth, and he's got, and he's way bigger than me. I'm a little guy anyways, and And I got scared. And I didn't know what to, and I was like, how can I get out of here? And of course, luckily, I realized I can't get out of here. Where am I going to go? We're in the middle, where I'm out from shore. I'm not close to shore. It's his turf. And all of a sudden he goes like this. He goes rough, 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 rough. And then he goes, "Choo," and he's under the water. And I'm like, oh, I should swim to shore fast. And I start swimming. I realize, oh, he could catch me in a second, right? Because he's a much better swimmer than I am. He's not using four limbs to try to swim. He's just anyhow. And so then I stopped and I realized there's nothing to do. And of course, nothing happened. I also realized then that the reason he was barking at me was not because he was angry, he was scared. And that was very illuminating to get that. Oh, I got scared, but he was scared. And of course, I've had a ton of other experiences of fear in my life. It's all grist for the mill. It's all begins to awaken the courageous heart to face our fear and metabolize the experience of the fear. And I believe you all know this already, that it takes courage to meditate, that to stay with your experience directly, especially difficult experience, difficult feelings that come up, anger or irritation or feeling lost or loneliness or sadness or boredom or fear or judgment, to be able to stay present and be aware of it and not just believe it, but to see it's a feeling and be able to be aware of it so we can start to be free of it. And of course, one of the hardest things that happens in meditation that we need to have the courage to be aware of and stay with is being bored. Anybody ever get bored in meditation? Am I the only one? Okay, thank you. Good. I mean, sometimes it's just boring. It's just nothing's happening. I'm sitting, I'm watching my breath, kind of, and it's boring. But if we can be aware of the boredom itself, it can be very freeing because boredom is just a state of consciousness. Mm. And of course, then we see when we really are mindful of boredom, we see that we're thinking something is supposed to happen. Who said anything's supposed to happen? What if we just allow ourselves to be? And you all know this, but I'll remind you, we're human beings. We're not human doings. We're not human something's supposed to happen. And part of what meditation practice does is allow us to relax into our beingness that's here, to come into harmony with what's true. And one of the different words for harmony are to come into accord or to concord with what's true. And both those words, like courage, have the core word, which means heart. To come into accord with reality is a heartfelt act of bravery, of truth, of being real with what's here. And so courage is to act um, from what we love, the qualities of heart that we love: kindness, clarity, here-ness, devotion, realness. And of course, I'm here at Spirit Rock now, and it's about the sixth day of the retreat. We're finishing the sixth day tonight of the retreat. And it's so beautiful till we have 95 people here practicing. Everybody wears masks inside. Everybody's been vaccinated before they come. Everybody got tested the day they're here. Everybody got tested again yesterday. Everybody's COVID free, so it's relatively safe. You can still get a cold here anyways, but we're trying to protect against COVID. But beginning any retreat, if you've ever done a retreat, it's often scary. Most people are scared before they begin a retreat, or if they're not scared before they begin, they're scared when they start the retreat. Like, what's going to happen? Or what am I doing here? Or why did I come? And there's some kind of anxiety. And we can be aware of it as part of practice instead of believe it. And I've had some very powerful fear on meditation retreats. And on my first long meditation retreat many, many years ago at IMS, doing a long retreat during the 3 month course, I had a panic attack. And I was so young and naive. And all I was doing was following the instructions, which were very simple. And the instructions are whatever is here, be aware of it, note it, and stay present with it. You don't do anything else. And I was actually doing standing meditation. I would do an hour of standing meditation every day on that retreat. I was doing standing meditation, and all of a sudden I started to feel something was wrong, something was wrong, something was wrong. And I felt really uncomfortable. It was like my heart was beating and I felt really uncomfortable and I knew something so I'm just noting heart beating, heart beating, heart beating, fast, fast, heart beating fast, heart beating fast, and then I can't breathe. It's like I can't breathe, and so then I'm noting can't breathe, can't because I'm a good yogi, and I didn't know any better but to be a good yogi, so I did it, and then it's can't breathe, can't breathe, can't breathe, can't breathe, and it was like and the most interesting thing, and this was for a few minutes, this was not just for 10 seconds or 20 seconds. I mean, it wasn't like I didn't breathe for a few minutes, but it felt like I couldn't breathe, right? And then all of a sudden it went like this. Whatever was happening in my body went shoo, and it went out my feet and into the earth, and then I was fine. And I remember going into my meeting with Joseph Goldstein later that day and telling him what happened. And he said, "Oh, you had a panic attack." I said, "Oh yeah, I didn't even know it was a panic attack. I just knew here this is what happened." So staying with the lived experience was easier than thinking I had a panic attack because that would have scared me even more if I would have thought that. And it's one of the things we're doing here is we keep encouraging people, supporting them, guiding them. Just be with the direct experience, whatever it is. Don't add anything onto it. Don't add your idea, your interpretation, your belief, your desire. Let that be, let that relax. Be with just the breath, whether it's a short breath or a long breath or a full breath or a rough breath, or a breath feels good or it feels bad. Just be with it however it is. And it's the same with the feelings. You don't have to fix the feelings when you're meditating. You don't have to fix the thoughts. You don't have to fix anything. There's a potential for things to self liberate. Trungpa Rinpoche, the brilliant Tibetan Buddhist teacher, Trungpa said, "Courage is the proclamation that every mind state is workable." Courage is the proclamation that every mind state is workable. And two things, just to give you some context if you don't know Trungpa. Trungpa escaped the Chinese invasion of Tibet as a teenager walking over the Himalayas to freedom, right? Um, and also, Trungpa started the Vipassana tradition as we know it in America. He asked Joseph and Jack to teach at the Naropa Institute, which he'd founded in Colorado. And that's when they started teaching together. And that was the beginning of what became IMS, the Insight Meditation Society, and then Spirit Rock later. And so he's part of our lineage in that way. And he said, courage is a proclamation that every mind state is workable. And the secret Buddhist teacher, Henry Miller, who was an author in the last century, Henry Miller said, voyages are accomplished inwardly, and the most hazardous ones, voyages are accomplished inwardly, and the most hazardous ones are made without moving from the spot. And what I'm saying is, wow, I just lost my talk. Let me go put it back here. There we go. Um, what he's saying, the most hazardous journeys are right here, in discovering who and what we are and having the courage to discover the depth and beauty of what we are, as well as the dukkha and difficulty that's here. My teacher, Hamid Ali, said we need a bold, courageous, adventurous heart to take us where we have never gone, because that's what the inner journey is, going where we haven't gone before. It takes an adventurous spirit to say, let's jump in, let's jump and see what happens. The sense of courage, of boldness in whatever arises, in whatever happens, will allow ourselves to be vulnerable and to wake up. Mm. And of course, in our life, in our world, it takes courage to be in our personal life. E. E. Cummings, a great poet, said it takes courage to grow up and become who you really are. And that becoming who you really are never ends. We never get to the final who we are. We keep discovering what's here and who we are. And there's more to us. And if you have the good fortune to be as old as I am, which some of you look like you are, it's just wild to see what shows itself at an age of life that people don't usually value very much. But the wisdom of aging is just beautiful. So courage is needed in our life, in our relationships with our loved ones, and really every which way. Lao Tzu, the Taoist teacher, said being deeply loved by someone gives you strength, while loving someone deeply gives you courage. And at least if you've been in relationship with children or parents or partner, it takes courage at some point when you love people, because if you've noticed, they don't do what you want. You know, sometimes they do, but in my world, they tend to do more what they want. And another thought about courage in our lives, this is from Steve Jobs, who created Apple. And he was talking with a college class. He was giving the speech at the commencement. He said, remembering that you are going to die is the best way I know to avoid the trap of thinking you have something to lose. Remembering that you are going to die is the best way I know to avoid the trap of thinking you have something to lose. You are already naked. There is no reason not to follow your heart. Beautiful understanding from Steve Jobs. Hmm. And of course, in our civic life, in our life in the world, we have to be courageous, right? To deal with politics, all the fear in politics, all the anger, distrust, unclarity, all the me and them, you and me, you're wrong, I'm right. Maureen Murdoch said, we must have the courage to live with paradox, the strength to hold the tension between not knowing what to do, what the answers are, and the willingness to listen to our inner wisdom and the inner wisdom of the planet, which begs for change. And when I first wrote this talk, it was right after the change in the law about Roe versus Wade. And the courage for many of us to address that and keep addressing that and do what we can to be as free as possible for women to do what they want with their bodies. And of course, I know that's different, and some of you may be against abortion, and some of you may be for it. But the choice is what I don't want to tell anybody ever to go get an abortion. But I don't want to ever have to tell anybody, no, you can't get an abortion, because it's not my business as I understand it. Coco Chanel, who was a designer, I think clothes, Coco Chanel, she said the most courageous act is still to think for yourself. And then she added, it says, the most courageous act is still to think for yourself. And then she says, out loud, right? Like to be heard, to let your voice be heard. Or another beautiful, courageous woman is Malala Yousafzai, who was, and excuse me if I say that name wrong, but a Pakistani female education activist who survived a head wound from the Taliban in 2012 when she was and won the Nobel Prize at 17. She said, "I don't mind if I have to sit on the floor at school. All I want is an education, and I am afraid of no one." Tremendous courage for someone who's faced death. And the Dalai Lama, who said, no matter what is going on, never give up. Develop the heart, develop your courage. Too much energy in your country, talking to the West, the United States, is spent developing the mind instead of the heart. Be compassionate, not just to your friends, but to everyone. Be compassionate. Work for peace in your heart and in the world. Work for peace. And I say, never give up. No matter what is going on around you, never give up. And he's had the courage to deal with losing his whole world as a young man, everything, his country being occupied and taken over by the Chinese government, and then becoming the political leader in a very active way and doing it, and then creating a democracy within the Tibetan tradition so he could step down from being the political leader and just be, as he says, a simple monk. I think I'm going to stop there. And I want to hear from you, any thoughts, any responses, reactions, anything you liked, anything you didn't like. I love to hear if you didn't like or you don't agree with me or I was wrong. And you can raise your hand on my Zoom. It's in the reactions button down at the bottom. If you open that button, there should be actually, I'm not sure where it is on this one because I don't see it when I push mine, but or you can just raise your hand. There's not that many people here, so I can call on you. And if you yeah, or we could just sit for a minute and go to sleep. Oh, there we go. Lamise, how do you say your name? Okay, so please unmute. I think you can just do that yourself.
Yep, I can.
Great. And wait, I'm going to put you on speaker so I can see you face to face. Okay, speak, please.
And I always get nervous before I speak, so.
Okay, I do too. Not a problem.
Uh, in meditation, I got a thought about Putin and Trump.
Mm-hmm.
And in this, I'm a 60s gal, right? But not, 100% because I wasn't in America all this time. I come from another country.
Yeah, but there were 60s in that country too.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
These were a little bit different. But I'm wondering that what we may need to do as a person to get in touch with our own inner Putin and our own inner Trump in order to transform the planet rather than point fingers.
Uh-huh. Beautiful. Beautiful what you're saying.
But it's not easy, because it's confronting parts of ourselves that are, abhorrent.
Yeah. Well, they could be abhorrent, or they could be the parts of us that are unconscious, that aren't free yet, and that are seeking freedom in ways that aren't skillful, which is how I understand both Putin and Trump, who are, not my favorite people. And I did a long series about heart in San Francisco Insight a few years ago when Trump was president of the United States. And the hardest thing that I taught was I did a one teaching on loving kindness. And in that, I talked about sending love to Donald Trump. And a lot of people in San Francisco Insight are not Donald Trump fans. They don't like him. And so what happened was people had a reaction to it because they thought, oh, he's a bad guy. And I gave a talk about him then, about why we offer our loving kindness to Donald Trump, because he's suffering. And the way his suffering manifests is that it comes out towards everybody else. And what you're saying is we have our own Donald Trump in us. It's some version, probably smaller.
Being self-centered is one.
There are
people who are self-centered, and he is extremely self-centered.
You could say that. He's extremely self-centered. Some people call him narcissistic and like to the hilt. Yep. And where does narcissism actually is a psychological illness. Where does it come from? It comes from pain.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the reasons we can be kind to ourselves when we see our own self-centeredness. And we can also be kind to Donald Trump because he needs help.
Yeah.
And help may come in different ways. Sometimes it might be really being firm with him, like when you deal with a little kid who's out of control because they're hurt or they're scared or they're hungry or whatever it is. You still need to be firm with them, but you don't stop the love. The love is still there. And so the loving kindness, even for Donald Trump, is important. And the loving kindness for our own inner Donald Trump is important. Right. And it's, of course, same for Putin, too. And it doesn't mean we don't be strongly proactive at times to stop wrong action.
But we all have an aggressor within us, and it's very hard to be just aware of those parts of ourselves. Because it all starts with loving ourselves and not judging.
Right.
We are able to do that, then there's a shift in consciousness. And we will see things differently. Do you know? Right. You will understand them differently. But
here's the tricky part, and this is tricky partly because I don't know you, but you want to be careful not to think, oh, you just have this huge Donald Trump in you, because I don't believe you do. You may have a little,
Right.
of that. And so, but also, you want to also see the goodness that's right here, that I'm sure is here. I have no doubt is here, because you wouldn't come to, be on Zoom on, whatever night it is, Wednesday night, without goodness in the heart.
Yeah.
So you want to recognize not just the dukkha, but the sukha. Sukha is the opposite of dukkha. Yeah. And very helpful.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate you speaking up. Who else would like to go? I got to go back to gallery view. Come on. Any questions, comments? There we go. Diane, please. Okay, you're next, but Diane first. Sorry.
Meet Diana?
Diana, sorry.
Yeah. Okay. I appreciate the various examples you gave. I tend to respond to stories. And the idea of you in the water, with, I think it was the sea lion. And the idea that he was afraid too, just really got to me, because the other person, the people around the other situation, I've really been thinking about that. There's much fear there. We may not see it, but they're the human condition. And I really, that spoke to me. And also just keeping at it. You were talking about your panic attacks, and possibly maybe 1,000 times you were saying, I can't breathe. You just kept with it. And it just, at some point,
it's self-liberated.
So you didn't give up, even if it's day and night and you're still doing it, or I mean,
right. And sometimes you might have to recede in order to come back again, and that's an important piece of practice in general. Like I said, I was very young then, first long retreat. I'm just going to do the instructions. I'm a young guy who's a little macho, right? And so I'm going to do it, but sometimes going away is the skillful means for coming back. And that's also important to see. Mm-hmm. That's the courage to be with what's true is a very deep part of practice. The courage to see, okay, this is not the right time to go through. Now it's time to pull back and regather my balance so I can come back and be with it again. That makes sense?
Yes, that's wonderful. I just wanted the idea of allowing ourselves being vulnerable, and the Steve Jobs quote about we're already naked. There's no reason not to follow our heart. That gives me some courage with something I'm going to do.
Great.
So thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks, Steve Jobs. Really, I thought that was really powerful when I read it. Yeah, good.
Thanks.
Okay, you.
Thank you, Eugene, for your talk. So carried me back to my own youth, and when I was a socially conscious hippie in New York, and working with the Student Nonviolent Coordinating.
Oh yeah, SNCC. I remember SNCC.
And we one day after we had just finished a meeting, and the person was leaving, said, "Well, we're all going to get on a bus and go down to North Carolina and integrate an amusement park down there called the Family Fun Center." And so at 11 o'clock at night, I got on the bus and became a freedom rider. And we drove all night down there, got down there early in the morning. We went to a Black church where there were about 200 Black people who were gathered there to go and integrate this Family Fun Center. And 25 of us students from New York were going to be in there with them, supporting them. So we met in the church, and before we went to the park, the preacher, who on that day happened to be Martin Luther King, told us that we were very likely going to encounter some violence there, and that there was a possibility of injury or even death, and that if any of us, but that he wanted us to take a vow of nonviolence. Mm-hmm. And he said, if you cannot take this vow to remain peaceful no matter what happens, then you should get up and leave and not go to the park. Well, no one left. We all got back on our bus and got bused down to the Family Fun Center. Once there, the local police were there, and they had sort of they positioned themselves in such a way that the only place we could go was where we wanted to go, really, down this funnel-shaped ramp that led down in between two tall, 10-foot tall chain link fences down to the entrance gate to the park, which was locked. So we got funneled down into that ramp, and we got there. We could not proceed forward, so we sat down as we'd been instructed to do. And the local men from the town gathered and appeared on the other side of the chain link fence, and I brought with them stones and half bricks and pieces of lumber. And they started lobbing them over the top of the fence to rain down on us. The local police kind of turned their backs for 5 minutes while this went on. And we just sat there quietly, very quietly. I don't know what was going on in other people's minds, but in my mind, I was just repeating my mantra over and over again. I will not strike back. I will not flinch. I will not run. I will not fight. I would just sit here and breathe and just focus on my breath. And after 5 minutes, the cops turned around and they arrested us for disturbing the peace and took us off to jail. And that night, we spent that night in jail. I was lucky to be in a cell with Dr. King and 4 other men of the cloth. And we sang all night and discussed the power of nonviolence, the strength of it, how strong it made us earlier in the day. And you spoke, Eugene, about the French word courage meaning heart. And I think that that was our strength. It was,
It's a beautiful story you're telling because it's real and it happened. And Martin Luther King was a total bodhisattva in the Christian tradition. And he understood the power of love. And love is one of the expressions of the heart. And he was incredibly courageous, and I'm appreciative that you had the good fortune to be able to spend time with him.
Amen.
Yeah, amen. Yeah, great. Thank you. Yeah, very moving. And you just hear, and even somebody like Martin Luther King, you just know, if you followed his life and story at all, how he changed the whole world, right? Just by following and trusting his heart and being heartfelt in his total resistance to apartheid and to racism.
Yeah, and Mahatma Gandhi before him.
Yes.
Gandhi and his son, they faced the British Army. They had guns,
Yeah.
But, the power of nonviolence was stronger than those guns. Yeah.
Changed the world totally. Yeah, great. Thank you. Anybody else? Any questions? Anything about your practice? Anything about anything? Oh, there we go. Hi, Alan.
Hi, Eugene. Talk about Diamond Heart and how that fits in with your practice.
Diamond Heart. Yeah, Diamond Heart's another spiritual tradition. I tell people I'm poly-spiritual or bi-spiritual at least, you know, and I am. And I'm a teacher in Buddhism, and I'm a teacher in the Diamond Approach, which is Diamond Heart, the same thing. And it's a small spiritual tradition, and that's very powerful and very good. And a lot of Buddhist teachers have been in the Diamond Approach school. It's modeled as a school, and you join the school, and you know, like Sharda Rogel is in the Diamond Approach, and Mark Coleman's in the Diamond Approach, and Frank Ostaseski's in the Diamond Approach, and Jack Kornfield's also, and the lead teacher in the Diamond Approach is Hamid Ali, who is a beautiful being, and the main practice in the Diamond Approach is in inquiry or investigation. And you inquire into the nature of reality right here. And so Jack's been a student of Hamid's for 40 years. And Jack's not in the actual school, but he works individually with Hamid, meaning he goes to see with Hamid so that Jack can do inquiry with Hamid and learn about inquiry. And Jack loves inquiry, loves working with Hamid. We've had many talks about it. And so, and is there any other question I could answer about the Diamond Approach for you?
Well, I just remember being in retreats with you, and I really enjoyed it. It was really uplifting. It really opened up a lot in my heart, and it allowed me to have these one-on-one, face-to-face conversations with people about deep subjects. So I was very grateful for that.
Were you in the Diamond Approach with me?
No,
but just where we did inquiry?
I took a number of, was in Spirit Rock a number of times with you.
Right.
Yeah. And you always used that inquiry as part of it. And that was very good.
We would always do a little inquiry, because really in Buddhism, it's called investigation. It's the second factor of awakening, and it's undervalued and underutilized and undertaught, in my opinion. And so I like to do it on many retreats. I don't do it on every retreat. We're not doing inquiry here, but it's such a beautiful practice and very important to start to learn more about how to open consciousness in different ways, meditation being a key way, inquiry being another key way to do it.
When we have breakout groups, it seems to remind me of that approach.
Yes, that's what they're good for. Really. Anything else?
Thank you.
Okay. Thank
you. The other thing, it's important to how we talk about sila, and that we have a choice. I mean, we can actually make a choice, even with all these things flowing through our brains, between what's wholesome, what's unwholesome, what's skillful, what's unskillful. That's part of this inquiry. That's part of the investigation.
Totally. Every day.
Every day.
Every day is part of our life as we speak. What's really helpful? What's not helpful? What's needed? What's not needed? Right? And you don't even have to think it through when you really start to immerse yourself in it. You just get, oh yeah, this is what's helpful. And then they say, there's a great story in Zen where the master is dying, and a student comes to him and said, well, what's the goal of a lifetime of practice? And the master says, an appropriate response. He doesn't say liberation or freedom or, enlightenment. He says an appropriate response. And what we're doing here, even tonight, is we're learning how to be present, be aware, be awake now, so the appropriate response can emerge in the moment, every moment, any moment.
Okay, so that reminds me of the retreat that we were both on with Analio on mindfulness and breathing, and he would talk about situational creativity.
Beautiful.
You remember that phrase?
I don't, but it's beautiful.
I think that's the way he said it, but it was like, be here now. What do you need to be creative where in this situation, right at the present moment?
Yeah. Well, we'll just say that this is an Alan Schmidt quote. Whether Analia said it or not. No, it's really, and say that again, creative.
Well, I think he said situational creativity.
Yeah, I think you're right. Situational creativity. Beautiful phrase, really. Yeah. Beautiful understanding.
Yeah. And then investigation, as it opens the heart, leads to energy.
Totally.
And what does energy lead to? It can lead to rapture. Can lead
joy.
To and that's profound to let that happen.
Yeah, and what you're describing is the deepening of concentration that happens. Yeah, beautiful.
So any sources regarding investigation that you can recommend, like a book or a teaching?
You could read Hamid's book, but it's not Buddhism.
It's okay.
He's got a book called Here's the book. It's called Space Cruiser Inquiry. Space Cruiser Inquiry, and Hamid's pen name is A. H. Almas. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So you could check out Space Cruiser Inquiry.
Just saying that it's part of the Buddhist thing that's not very well talked about.
Yeah,
it's helpful. It connects them.
Yes, it does.
I've seen Almas, but I didn't want to go there just by itself.
Yeah, well, but check it out.
Seeing it as that now is more interesting.
Yeah, and then just Google investigation in Buddhism and see what comes up.
I will.
Okay, good.
Thank you for bringing it up.
That was Alan brought it up. I'm trying to get back to, let me see, gallery view. Okay, anybody else before we stop? Oh, there we go, Mark.
Thanks. Hi, Eugene. So I do love this quote, every mind state is workable.
Yeah.
Which is much easier said than done.
Of course.
And so I've had some experiences where very difficult mind states, a lot of confusion, a lot of anxiety, hard to know where to focus or even how to attend to it when you're in a very difficult sit. Or whatever, doesn't have to be a sit, but
but let's stay with sitting, because then what gives you support during a sitting? So in other words, if I've got a difficult mind state, which I've had a million of in Buddhism, in sitting, I'll come back to the breath. Or if that doesn't work, then I'll come back to just feeling the posture of the body. I come back to mindfulness of the body, breath, or just feeling the posture, or just feeling, or I'll do a body scan, which is also a form of meditation, that we can utilize. That for me is very calming. And then I can open to the difficulty that's here. So you want to rebalance.
Yeah, I think that, there's this battle between what's going on, what is this? And then, getting kind of, you can get sort of, your mind just gets wrapped around sort of searching or anxiety.
Right.
Versus, okay, let that go entirely and just try to find a calming focus.
Right. And so, yeah, that's very skillful not to just go with your mind's ruminations about the experience.
Yeah.
And just to be aware that the mind is, you know, the word papancha. Yeah. It's just papancha.
Right.
If you don't know the word papancha, it means proliferation of mind. Just talking to you.
Okay.
And of course, good luck when it's hard, because it's hard sometimes. And so the kinder, the heartfulness of the compassion of the heart becomes really important as part of the courage to stay with what's here.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay.
I got some more to ask.
Who?
Alan. Alan has some more
Alan, there you are.
I hope you don't mind, but it's a rare opportunity to be with you again. And
okay.
I started off in a meditation group that I'm not the body, I'm not the mind, immortal self I am. So with that as a mindset, as my first group,
say that.
I'm not the body.
Again. Yeah.
I'm not the body. I'm not the mind. Immortal self I am. So it took me a long time. It's taken me. I'm still doing it. How to actually do Buddhism with the body. I mean, it's liberating, and I mean that got me stuck where it was all mental. It was all trying to be something that I wasn't, and it was so grounding in Buddhism. And what you helped me with a great deal, every time we had a conversation at these retreats, you would say, well, Alan, what's the felt sense of that?
Yeah.
And it's like, what?
Yeah.
And that has been, you know, I'm still working with that. Indeed, it's not something that I've mastered in any way, but that's really it seemed to be really part of your teaching, is that we need to look at that. I think that's, even without using those phrases.
I'm interested in embodied awareness. Embodied awareness, because we're right here. We're already right here. And it's just being aware of what's right here. And I didn't say this, and I apologize, but I could have said to all of you, be aware of your body while you're listening to me, because speaking and listening is part of the first foundation of mindfulness. It's in a whole section about mindfulness in all activities, and mindfulness in all activities is an embodied practice of sitting, standing, walking, putting one's clothes on, reaching one's limbs and arms, eating, defecating, urinating. It's all embodied practice. And then speaking and listening is right there in that same section of mindfulness of the body. And so even now, feel your bodies while you're listening to me. Feel your body, Alan. It's right here. It's free. You can feel it for free. Nobody will charge you for being mindful of your body.
It took me a long time to realize that meant be present. How can I be present? Be present. I got to be in here. This is what present is. This is what moment is. This is right now.
You're already in here. You just want to be aware that you're in here.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Is that good enough for tonight? Okay. I'm just looking now at the, oh yeah, you can send me a check. I'm just looking at everything. Robin, to everyone, suffering can be our superpower. Robin, that's so true. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Because suffering is the doorway to freedom, right? There's dukkha, and then the cause of dukkha, and then the end of dukkha. That's the power of suffering. It can free us. You don't get free without dukkha. Anything you need to say before we end?
No, I just wanted to thank you, Eugene, for taking time out of your retreat, and also just to call attention to being careful with the name if you're making a payment through PayPal, because there's a number of Eugene Cashes, and I noticed that there's a Eugene at eugenecash.net and .com, and I believe yours is .net, correct?
I think they might be both of mine, but I'm not sure about the .com. I know about the net one.
Okay.
That for sure. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I made donations to both, so we'll find out.
Okay. We'll see what happens.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you all. Should we do a little sharing of merit to end?
Please.
So taking a moment to reflect on our good fortune, that we've got the time and the place and the electronic means so we could be together tonight. And that the good fortune of my colleagues who let me leave the retreat tonight and be here with you. And really appreciating their good fortune and the blessing of being able to practice together. And may that blessing go out in every direction, in every realm, in every world. May all beings be happy and peaceful. May all beings be free from suffering. May all beings discover their inherent courage to respond to suffering and to change the world and make it a better place for everyone. May all beings be free.